Hey, welcome back to the Secret Underground Lair. So today we are getting ready to put our little face pieces on the arcs. And what I'm doing at the moment is just scribing a line on here, which is going to be used as fundamentally just a reference mark, so that when I put it on the arcs, I'll know roughly where to position the router. So I'm off just a little bit there. I want to move that out. So this line isn't necessarily where I'm going to be making the cut, but it will let me gauge where I want to put the height of the router and so on. So you'll see that when we get over the arcs, but getting pretty close. This piece, of course, is too long. It's going to be cut. And it looks like the position of the leg is going to let me cut this piece about here, getting rid of this whole bit of nastiness where I have this hole here and a bunch of nastiness on this side. So that looks like it's going to get all cut out. That's down the road. I'll scribe the other side and then we'll set up the arcs and get going over there. So one interim step before going on to the arcs is I'm just going to use the bandsaw and trim off some of the excess on these pieces, just so that there's a little bit less work for the router to do. You can see there's a lot of excess wood here, so we'll trim that off and then go to the arcs. So I trimmed up to about 1/4 of an inch of the line. That'll get rid of a lot of unnecessary cutting on the arcs. So let's go to the arcs now. We've got our piece set in the Arc Router Cutting Sled, arcs. The latest edition, maybe you saw in the last video, was using a little drill press vise. This is going to work out really well. So I've got the piece positioned, clamped in, got the router set to the right depth. We are ready to commence. The first pass is going to be a little bit deep, but I'll just be going slow and taking shallow side cuts through it. So let's see how that works out. So I'm very pleased with that cut. I'm going to go down about another 1/8 of an inch and we'll call that a good cut. I'm going to make sure that I mark the router depth at that point because I want the second piece to go exactly the same depth. And by depth I mean the distance, the radius that the router will be set to. So we'll have both pieces the same if I can be sure of that. All right, one more cut. And there are the faces cut. Real nice circle. I'm really pleased with the way the Arcs finishes this off. So real nice curves. They follow the line very well. Not perfect, but well enough. So what I'm thinking about doing next is just going to trace a line around here on the inside edge, and I think I'll just kind of trim that off with the bandsaw, make it about that thick, so I don't want to encroach on these splines. But that might just give a better finish on the inside of the table. On the last table, I left them kind of squared off like this, and I don't know, I just kind of I'm not really happy with that, so I thought, well, let me try rounding it off and see what it looks like. So we'll do that next, and then we'll figure out the position of the legs and where to make the cuts here and here to fit into the legs. So I've got this inner edge marked of where I want to cut on the bandsaw, and to get that line, I just use my finger and a pencil. I found the distance here at the join, and then I just kind of go like this. And that gives me a rough line to follow all the way around. So we'll cut this through on the bandsaw now. And that's what they look like with the inside cut. Already I'm happier with the look of that. So, well worth doing. Okay, next we'll figure out the leg positioning. I have added to the marking on the tabletop to indicate where the leg is going to be sitting. That's the middle leg, and where I have this back leg and the other back leg. And now by positioning our cut face so that the seam is in the middle and the table is touching the line there and touching my perimeter line down here, I can now mark, this is where the inside of the cut needs to be, and that's where the outside needs to be. So I'm just going to adjust that mark a little bit, that's wrong. And did the same thing down at this end. So I've got a mark there at the edge of the leg on the outside, and a mark here on the edge of the leg on the inside. So that's the, when I position this on the jig, I'll be able to make the cut go through at that angle. Just a quick look at how this is now set up in the saw. You can see I've got this line right up against the edge of the tooth on the blade here. So that'll go through right there. And then I know that the saw is going to pass through the fence on the miter. You can see a little cut, and I have lined up the edge there of that cut with the line. So I know that the piece is lined up in the right orientation vertically to cut the line that I want. Worked perfectly, so I'll just make 4 more of those, or 3 more of those cuts. All right, pieces are cut. We'll do a little test fit on the table, and then we'll get ready to cut the dovetail in each of these pieces. That is looking really good. I'm pleased with that fit. There's one more thing I need to do, and that is double check the distance here the width of this face. This is to match the previous painted DemiLune table that we made, so I'm going to have to trim this up just a little bit, probably take a little bit off there, so I'll go measure that now, come back and cut it if necessary. All of our face pieces are now cut to the appropriate length and angle. Even the little end bits are ready to go. So the next thing we'll do is load up the router table and cut the dovetails. So I have marked each piece where I want to cut that dovetail so there's no confusion when I get it on the table. I'll cut the face pieces first, and then I need to move the fence on the router table out 1/4 inch to accommodate the legs. So let me get that set up and I'll come back when we're ready to route. So I set the height of the router bit to 1/4 inch simply by putting a 1/4 inch piece of plywood, and I'm just making that bit just slightly proud of this 1/4 inch plywood. And then to get a 1/4 inch away from the fence, I'm just using that same piece, getting the bit to touch the 1/4 inch plywood. That's how far it is away from the fence. When I go to do the legs, I want to be a 1/4 inch deeper, so I'm going to use a 1/2 inch piece of MDF as my guide. So I've marked the table where I want to stop. I'm just going to double check those lines. Yes, those are 3 inches in, which is good. These pieces are 3.5 inches deep. So we're stopping about a 1/2 inch away from the end, which means it'll be blind when you look at it from the exposed side. Okay. I think we're ready to go. I'll be coming in this way for some of the pieces and coming in this way for other pieces. For example, on this piece, it's the face that I want to have up against the fence. So I'm going to set the piece on this like so and bring it in up to this line. This piece, there's my face. I'm going to go this way to get up to that line. It's a little bit of back and forth, but you'll see what I do as I go. I'm not going to risk trying to pull the piece back out of the tool. I did that last time around and wound up making not such clean joints. So I'll just repeat that for the other pieces. Okay, there's our dovetails on those pieces. Now we need to do the dovetails on the legs. And for this, I will want to move the fence back a 1/4 inch beyond where it is. So I'm going to get a piece of 1/2 inch MDF and make that adjustment. Okay, our router bit is set up. Fence is set up properly, so away we go. Now this being oak, I'm expecting a little bit more, a lot slower progression on this wood. Actually, the bit handled that very well. Under that way, and I want to come this way. I have to move the camera a little bit. I want to make sure that the same face is against the fence for both of these cuts. Okay, that's all our dovetail joinery made. Now I need to make the dovetail splines or dovetail mortises. So I'm going to make some dovetails, that little dovetail tenons. I had made a couple on the arcs in the last time we made a DemiLune table. And I mentioned at that time I didn't want to cut them on the table saw because that's kind of finicky to get through the saw. But I came up with a way that I think it's actually not too bad to cut on the table saw. What I have here is a 1/2 inch piece of oak, and the grain is running vertically through this. I'll turn it over so you can see that. So the grain is nice and vertical, which means that if I have a dovetail kind of cut into this edge, the vertical nature of the grain is going to keep it strong through the joint. So I've set up the saw here, tilted the blade at 15 degrees, and I'm just going to raise the blade up to be 1/4 of an inch or halfway through this piece of stock. It can be a little bit more than 1/4 inch. So I'm just kind of eyeballing it about halfway. Next, I'll bring the fence in, just so that I cut into that. And now I'm going to make a pass through this way, flip the piece over, and make a pass this way. I'm going to cut a dovetail, a piece for dovetail tenons, the length of this piece, and then I can cut it in small chunks when I'm done. So we'll start by making these 2 cuts. So you can see the profile cut on that piece. So what I'm going to do now is move the fence over to the other side. And I'm going to be putting the piece through like this so that the dovetail is going to fall away from the blade. So 2 passes, and we'll have a whole bunch of dovetail mortise material. And there we have a whole bunch of mortise material. Dovetail tenons, actually. Dovetail tenons. And with that spline material cut, I'm now going to cut them into 3-inch lengths. So I need 6 pieces to go for the 6 legs. I'll just do that on the bandsaw. So before I cut those off on the bandsaw, I just gave them a little bit of a sand on the very sharp edges here. And then after cutting them on the bandsaw, I just put a little bit of a bevel on one end of it, on each of these, so that they'll slide into the joint a little bit better and less chance to bind. So I did a little test fit, and I found that when the pieces were coming together, I had just a slight gap. Not much, just a little bit, and it was a very tight fit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise the bit just a little bit, sorry, and then I'm going to run it through the legs again. So the legs will have a slightly deeper cut on it than the face pieces. I'll do another test fit and see how that goes. Yeah, the slightly higher setting is necessary, but I'm going to do it on the face, on the leg pieces and the face pieces as well. So a little more fiddling, but be back in a second when I have all that done. So with those dovetails cut a little bit deeper, you can see I get a really nice snug fit here. So I'm going to put some glue on these joints, put it all together, and then we're ready to attach it to the top of the table. But you know, there'll be more sanding, but yeah, that's the fit. Oh, actually, hang on a minute, not so fast. I need to cut that little notch in each leg before I assemble this. I nearly forgot that. All right, I've got the leg up against a little miter guide and a stop block. Blade set to 1/8 of an inch, roughly. So I'm just going to make a pass 4 times through with each leg. Cut, rotate, do that 4 times for each leg. occurred to me too as I'm cutting these legs at these little notches on here that I'm getting a little excited and a little ahead of myself. I really need to be sanding these legs off before they're assembled, because it's so much easier to do it when they're off a table and free. In particular, I want to get rid of these very sharp edges. With oak, they get sharp and can cut not only a splinter, but just the sharpness of them and the hardness of the wood they cut. So I'm going to do a little sanding. I'll come back when all that's done. Okay, assembly. I've inserted the dovetail into this piece here with some glue. Now I'm going to slip it onto the leg. And we'll see how all this goes. I don't have the textbook on how to do this, so I'm kind of making it up as I go. But I do like that fit. Okay, so I'm going to insert a dowel into this piece next. I'm doing putting it into the faces and then using the leg as a little bit more, I can apply a little more force on the leg than I can on these face pieces, so hence the reason I'm doing that. There's our pieces dovetailed in. I like that. Do the same thing on this piece. Okay, our dovetail's all the way in there. Put some glue on this leg. Making sure I get the face outside. Got a real nice snug fit there. Oh, I'm liking it. I think I'm just going to put the dovetail in this end as well. This mechanism actually works a little better. Drive the dovetail down into the piece while it's on the bench. That makes so much more sense. This one may be a little bit more grievous. Let's see. Nope. Oh, that just fit perfectly. So nicely All right, and that has gone in really, really well. I'll bring in for a closer look, but I'm just absolutely delighted with the fit that I have here. This is a perfect